evening and welcome back to the lecture series on current affairs. Only 3 days remaining for prelims. I wish everyone all the very best who are appearing for prelims this year, UPSC prelims. And we'll continue our journey with the current affairs that we have been doing. Okay. And last week was very important from the polity aspect. Okay. So I have taken at least 3 topics today from polity section. Okay, so mostly the current affairs that is important is from environment, like some change in rule of like some environment act or some changes in biodiversity act or like that, or polity, because whenever the government is in session or parliament is in session, so some kind of changes are always taking place, you know? So those changes need to be we need to get hold of what changes are being done, and that is what makes the current affairs. And the third most important topic for current affairs is economics. Okay, so today I have taken the first topic that we have taken is community forest rights. Let's see why it has been in news. In a first, Chhattisgarh recognizes community forest rights of a village inside a national park. So when it is written in a first, okay, in a first, Chhattisgarh has recognized already around 40,000 community forest rights. Okay, but in a first, it has for the first time, Chhattisgarh state has recognized a community forest right of a community which resides inside a national park. Okay, which resides inside a national park. This in India, this is not a first. In Chhattisgarh, it is a first. In India, in Similipal, okay, Similipal, already, okay, Similipal mein already the community forest rights have been recognized by the government. Okay. So what we need to understand is that this is for the first time the Chhattisgarh state has recognized community forest rights within the state. Okay. As for the first time, the community forest rights, resource rights of village inside. Okay. Now, the national park that we are talking about is Kanergati National Park. It is important in the sense that it is on the banks of Indravati River. Okay. And as you can see here, this is Kanergati National Park. And it is on the border of Odisha. Okay, so this is important to understand. This is the map of the state of Chhattisgarh, which was erstwhile a part of Madhya Pradesh, right? Now we need to understand as to what a community forest right is, what are community forest resources, and what have been the development, what are the constitutional provisions that have been provided in the constitution for provision of rights of the people living in the forests. Okay, so because the people living in the forests are not carrying on their lives in the usual way as the normal people in villages or in the urban areas do, because people in the forests are called traditional forest dwellers. Their livelihood depends primarily upon the resources of the forest. Okay, so their lifestyle and their livelihood is not like ours. Okay, and that is why it is very important to make a distinction between the kind of livelihood that we have and the kind of livelihood that these people who are dwelling inside the forest have. Their priorities and their needs are very different from the people those are residing in the urban areas or the normal villages. Many of such people in the forest who are traditional forest dwellers, they are pre-agricultural societies. So they do not have the similar kind of family structure, the similar kind of society structure as we have. So that is why it is very important that constitution itself prescribes certain safeguards for their livelihood, for their the preservation of their culture and their way of life. And that is why constitution itself has provided at length a lot of provisions for the betterment of and welfare of the scheduled tribes and other forest dwelling tribals. Okay, Scheduled tribes are those tribes which are mentioned in the schedule of the constitution. Okay, the president basically issues a list, and in that list he prescribes such a community will be called a scheduled tribe. Okay, whenever it is about a scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, that means they have been specifically mentioned at some place, that is called a schedule. Okay, like there are chapters in constitution, right? Similarly there are schedules in the constitution. So we are not dealing with those schedules that are in the constitution, but when a president makes an order, okay, president has made an order as to such specific communities will be the scheduled tribes, such specific communities will be called scheduled castes. So these people become entitled to certain rights that our constitution provides. Okay, now the first forest act that came was in 1980s, 1880. Okay, and that forest act basically, what it did was it disenfranchised the people of forest, those people who are living in forest. It what it did was it disenfranchised, and it took away their livelihood also by preventing. Actually what Britishers did in 1880 was they wanted the forest resources for themselves. Okay, and all these people like Santhals, Mundas, and all these communities which were traditionally forest dwelling, their rights were taken away. Okay, so there's a lot of history behind this also, but we need not get that much deep into it. But still, the first legislation that was, it was Forest Act 1880. Okay, and then came Forest Act Forest Act 1927. Okay, the Forest Act 1880, what basically it did was it prohibited the forest communities from making use of the resources of the forest. Okay, so it actually limited the grazer communities, it limited the communities living in the forest, and of course the commercial exploitation of the forest resources was limited. It was license based. Matlab, you had to take government permission. That means government was the authority that was going to regulate. And of course, government made British government made such a laws that favored the Britishers over the Indian the Indian people who were trying to exploit the forest resources commercially. Okay, that means most of the forest produce, basically wood, logs, okay, they were exported back to UK. And that is how Forest Act 1880, what it did was it excluded the commercial exploitation of forests by the normal Indians. Okay, moreover, the irony is the Forest Act 1880 was came for the conservation of the forest resources. It can be said a colored legislation. It actually meant to protect the rights of British, the commercial right of British over the Indian forests, but it came in the garb of, in the color of protecting and conserving the forests. And again, Forest Act 1927, although it regulated certain activities, but the exclusion was lowered. Okay, and now a specific definition of forest villages and revenue villages came into existence. Like forest villages are those villages which reside, which are situated inside a forest. Okay, it can be protected forest, it can be a non-protected forest. Okay, and revenue villages are those villages which are not residing inside the forest, and they are the fundamental unit of revenue collection system of the British, basically, right? But this revenue village system was basically devised by Todarmal of the during the time of Akbar. Okay, so I hope you understood Forest Act 1880, Forest Act 1927. But both these acts, what they did was they uh, they took away the traditional rights of the forest dwelling communities. Okay, they took away the rights of the traditional rights of the forest dwelling communities to and the problem was these communities depended heavily, like their whole livelihood was dependent upon the forest resources. Okay, like they used to sell these minor forest produces into the non-forest areas, and they made revenue from them. But what these acts did was they took away a lot of traditional forest rights from these traditional forest dwelling communities or scheduled tribes. Okay, during the time of independence it was recognized, okay, and in the whole struggle for independence also, the forest community, the revolutions that these forest communities carried on against the British, that was recognized. Okay, like Santhal rebellion, okay, and the Birsa Munda's rebellion and all these. Okay, so फिर 19 when when constitution was formed, specific provisions were included in the constitution. Okay, one important provision that I would like to talk about here is the fifth schedule and the sixth schedule. Okay, the fifth and the sixth schedules. These were added in the constitution these were added in the constitution to provide for the protection of traditional rights of the people who are dwelling inside the forest. Okay, the fifth schedule and sixth schedule has a very minor distinction. We'll be getting on the very we'll try to get an eagle's eye view of both these schedules and what they mean, right? The fifth schedule is under article 244. Okay, article 244, very important to remember. The fifth schedule is under article 244, and it talks about the administration, okay, administration of the areas, basically administration of scheduled areas and the scheduled tribes both. It talks about both. It's very important to remember from prelims point of view what it talks about. Okay, it talks about the administration of scheduled tribes and scheduled areas in the states other than Assam, okay, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. Okay, now I hope you understood कि the fifth schedule talks about the administration of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes or other traditional forest dwelling communities within the states other than these four states, other than, to the exclusion of these four states, and the administration of these four states has been talked about in the sixth schedule. This is the primary difference between fifth schedule and sixth schedule. Now, why was that distinction made? Because Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram, they were the states with very heavy, they have areas of concentrated density of such communities which have been traditionally dwelling in forests. Okay? Like Assam, Karbi Anglong, okay, one such area, Bodoland, okay, and many such areas in these basically states are such that they do not govern themselves according to the constitutional provisions, the general constitutional provisions. So they have their own legislative assemblies as well. Okay, so they have an autonomous status. So they have got a lot of rights, like they have right to establish courts also, and they have rights to establish regional councils. Like there are legislative councils in each state. Like every state has a legislative council, okay, legislative council which makes laws for the whole state. But these four states, these four states, like for example, if you consider Assam, okay, Assam has a area called Bodoland. Okay, Bodoland is a area which is dominated by this Bodo community. Okay, these are scheduled tribes basically. They are scheduled tribes in the sense that they have been residing in that area for like a very long period, and they are called traditional forest dwellers of that area. And they are so large in number that they have their own, like Assam state, okay, Assam state has its legislative council, like which is called Vidhan Sabha, right? That is the Vidhan Sabha of Assam. But Bodoland Territorial Council, ठीक है. Bodoland Territorial Council is also there. This council governs and makes laws for this whole Bodoland area within the state of Assam. It has an autonomous status and it directly reports to the governor. Okay, understood? Okay, I hope you understood this. Now, if we talk about the other states, back to the fifth schedule, okay? If we talk about the other states in the fifth schedule, like for example, consider a state like MP or Chhattisgarh, okay, or Jharkhand. These states are having a substantial amount of forest dwelling communities. Okay, these states also have a substantial amount of forest dwelling communities. So Constitution has made this provision under Article 254, this fifth schedule, which talks about, like, in these states there is a regional council. Okay, so this council is itself what? This council is itself a legislative assembly kind of thing, which makes laws for itself. Okay, and the laws of state and the laws of parliament, laws made by parliament, are not applicable to this unless the governor makes the governor of that state makes an order to that effect. Matlab, unless the governor makes an order to that effect, any law made by the state or the parliament will not be applicable into that specific zone, that is autonomous zone of Bodoland. Okay, so similarly, but in the other states like MP, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, which do not have such regional councils, okay, what they do have, but they do have substantial amount of scheduled tribe communities. For the governance of these communities and for the betterment and welfare of these communities, keeping in view the different needs and priorities from the other people of the state, a different kind of governance is applicable to them also. Okay, and all the states where there exists, this article talks about the fact that all the states where there exists a substantial or substantial is not the term the Constitution uses. What I want to say is all the states where there is a scheduled tribe community population, okay, they can form what? Tribal Advisory Council. Tribal Advisory Council. Okay, now Tribal Advisory Council will be it will consist of 30 members, okay, for the term of 5 years, and majority of these people will be elected by the tribes, okay, from the community of the tribes, and this Tribal Advisory Council will report to the governor. Okay, they will report to governor. Fine. So in such states they do not have a autonomous zone or autonomous territorial area, but they do have what? A Tribal Advisory Council. Now Tribal Advisory Council is not a law making body, it is an advisory body which advises the governor on making laws or on the welfare, the issues that the tribes in that community in that particular state face. Okay, so I hope you understood the fundamental difference between the fifth schedule and the sixth schedule, and how the Constitution provides for the specific autonomous rights and other specific rights to these communities who are traditionally dwelling in these forests. Okay, now back to our lecture. फिर क्या हुआ? 2006 में this Forest Rights Act 2006 came. Okay, the objective of this article, the objective of this act, as stated in the act itself, is to undo the injustice done to these communities throughout the centuries. What the objective states, that the objective of this act is to undo the injustices that have been meted out to these communities throughout the centuries. Okay, like through Forest Act 1927 and all, their right to livelihood has been taken away by these acts. Okay, now Forest Right Act not only recognizes but it vests also. That means it, first of all, it recognizes that a right exists for a person who is dwelling inside forest, traditionally dwelling inside a forest. We will understand in a while what it means when we say traditionally dwelling. Okay. Now, what kind of rights does forest right provides? FRA provides. The first is title rights. Title right means right of ownership of the land. Title right means right of ownership of the land. Second is use rights. What kind of use that you can put your land to, and how can you use the produce of the forest, because you are traditionally dwelling inside a forest, and how can you use it? Okay, what are the limitations and what are your rights? So relief and development rights. Okay, relief and development means if something, for example, if government tries to declare some national park, and if there exists a core area, like there is a tiger reserve, ठीक है, and tiger reserve के अंदर एक core area होता है where no human settlement can be there, right? So in that situation, if government tries to make a certain specific geographical boundary as a core area of a tiger reserve, then they will be trying to evacuate people from that core area. In that case, the people who are traditionally dwelling inside a forest have the right of rehabilitation from the illegal eviction. Okay. And forest management rights. And one of the most important right that this act provides is the right of management of the forests. Okay. And under this right, the traditionally forest dwelling communities have the right to manage, right to get themselves involved in the management and the conservation of the biodiversity as well. And one important point to note here is this right, FRA 2006 provides such rights, and it also imposes duties on these people to conserve and protect the biodiversity of their surrounding. Okay, so in this case, it includes the right to protect, regenerate, or conserve or manage. Manage means when a Gram Sabha, like the authority is Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha is what? A Gram Sabha is the collection of all the people who are registered in the electoral roll of that specific boundary. Okay, that is called Gram Sabha. So the Gram Sabha has the right to make a decision. Like if the very basic example of this is, for example, if some company goes for mining activity, okay, so that company will have to take the environmental clearances, and that company will also have to involve such people through their Gram Sabha by in making the assessments like environmental protection or the environmental impact assessment, such kind of assessments. And these communities must have a say in the diversion of land resource that is taking place inside a forest. That right is called forest management right. Okay, so title right पे important है. This is most important because title right the title rights are those rights, that means the right of ownership of the land. Okay, so what it says is कि the right of ownership of the land formed by tribals or forest dwellers. Tribals mean those communities which have been mentioned specifically in the schedule that the president issues. ठीक है, so they are scheduled tribals. And other traditional forest dwellers are the people who are also living in that forest, although they are not categorized as a scheduled tribe. Okay, so they are traditionally also living inside a forest. And as I said earlier, we will be discussing what traditionally means. So traditionally means any person who has been residing inside that forest for at least 3 generations. For at least 3 generations, that means one generation is counted 25 years. So any family which is residing in that specific area for at least 75 years prior to the enactment of this act, that is 13th of December 2005, so they will be entitled to the rights of the farmland that they have. Okay, that is called title rights. The second important is use rights. Use rights are those rights to they have the right to manage, collect, sell, dispose the minor forest produce. The minor forest produce is like honeybee, honey wax, honey from the honeybees wax, like honey, and fruits, for example, which are fallen on the ground. and other lark also. So all these forest resources that these communities can collect, okay, that these communities can collect from the forest. They cannot harvest. Very importantly, they cannot go and harvest these produce in the forest. They can collect it that is naturally available. So they have, that is called minus forest produce, right to use, manage and dispose of a minus forest produce. The second is grazing rights. Like some certain communities like Gaddi community in Himachal or Gurjars in the upper Himachal and lower J&K state. These communities have been nomadic communities, and they have been moving, they do not practice settled livelihood. What they do is they have a flock of sheep, and they go to the pastoral areas. So these communities should have the right, their grazing right to the grazing areas in the traditional forest routes. Okay, so that is also been provided by the FRA. Relief and development right, which I already told. Okay, now who can claim the rights? As I told, ki who has resided in and depends upon the forest for their livelihood, they will have to prove this. Okay, secondly, at least they should be residing for 75 years on the 13th of December 2005. And Gram Sabha is the authority. Now, as I told, Gram Sabha is the collection of all the people. Gram Sabha is not a building. Most people confuse it by Gram Sabha is a building or Gram Sabha is an organization. It is an organization of specific nature where all the people inside the boundary of that village who are registered in the electoral rolls are called collectively Gram Sabha. Okay. I hope you understood this. Article 342, I already told this. One important point is Article 164. A very probable prelims question can be here. States like Bihar, MP and Odisha shall have Ministry of Tribal Welfare. Okay. Now Article 244, 5th schedule, I already told this. So I hope you understood this whole FRA 2006 and how our constitution provides for the betterment of and what this community forest rights are. Okay. Community forest rights have been recognized in this Chhattisgarh, the Kanergati National Park in Chhattisgarh. Community forest rights are the rights of the community over the forest land and over the forest minor forest produce. Like FRA provides two kind of rights, individual rights and community rights. Okay. So both these rights, individual rights are the right of people, like someone owning a land area of 4 hectare, he has the right of farming that land. That is called individual right. Now a village is depending upon a forest for its livelihood. So that becomes the community right. Okay. And this was in news because Chhattisgarh for the first time has recognized the community forest rights within a national park. And national park is the area of highest degree of protection. Okay. The national parks are the areas of highest degree of protection. So what the key takeaways from here? I will mention what we need to study from prelims and mains aspect. Okay. And what are the key takeaways here? The first one is what is scheduled 5 and 6. Okay. What are the schedule 5 and 6? The second one is who is authorized to issue, who is authorized to declare a certain community tribal community. Okay. Declare a certain community as tribal community or ST community. Okay. The third important point here to note here is from like mains. I hope you understood from the mains point of view. Now I am writing here down what are the important points that you should look for the prelims. Okay. The third important point is what is the basis of individual, okay, and community forest rights. And the fourth important point is where is Kanergati National Park. Okay, Kanergati National Park. And one additional point that you can look upon is the difference between a national park and wildlife area, which I have already taught in one of my lecture. ठीक है, तो I hope this is the key takeaway from this lecture. Okay.